warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Right, so there's actually been a change of plan. So, unfortunately, Altaf is going to be a bit late. Naveed might not be able to make it, might come a bit late. And so the original plan was to talk about, to discuss regarding the situation in France. Let's put the brightness way up. Situation in France and then the school dinner issue that we had here recently regarding the half-term holidays. But unfortunately, I am not the guy who has all the information on that. So I was relying heavily on Altaf and Naveed to come up with the facts. And unfortunately, like I said, Altaf is going to be a bit late and Naveed is going to be a bit more late or later. So I'm left here alone, or you guys are left with me alone until they turn up. But anyway, let's just start discussing something. If there is anyone who is interested in coming on this podcast today, then drop me an email. I'll just put the email here. Drop me an email on, let me just put it over here. Email, okay, here. Here's the email. Okay, just drop me an email and inshallah, I'll give you, and we can discuss regarding maybe France, maybe even regarding the situation with the school dinners, or more specifically, what I was gonna plan to talk about today, which was sort of spiritual problems that we have in the ummah at the moment, where which is to do with a lot of things, and I think a lot of what is that we see that happens, for example, like in France or in other countries, there's lots of problems that have led up to this. I'm not an expert in politics, so I wouldn't really be able to commentate on the politics side of it. But we can see this is a common theme that has happened in history, throughout Muslim history, where Muslims, whether it's a person might argue, for instance, like it might be something which is to do with the Muslims abandoning having a Muslim leader, or Muslims abandoning the prayers, or Muslim abandoning their values, or it's Muslims involved in worldly pursuits, or Muslims afraid of the inevitable, which is death and the hereafter. I think there's so many problems that Muslims are facing, and as a result, there's the kind of consequences that we are going to face in the world. No doubt about it is. It manifests in these forms where Muslims are, tortured, or Muslims are sidelined, or Muslims are vilified, or Muslims are used as scapegoats for political gain, and so many other things. And we saw it in 9/11 was a prime example of that. We saw it in, we've seen it in Bosnia. We've seen it in many places around the world, unfortunately. But the thing is, how do we deal with this? Because people are going to definitely get frustrated, without a doubt. There's going to be a lot of frustration. How do we deal with the Muslim Ummah? Yeah, how do we deal with this issue of the Muslim Ummah? Do we just take arms, like some people unfortunately have done, and just become vigilantes in their own communities and kill people, beheaded them? Is that the solution? Which obviously is not the solution, but some people assume that we take things into our own hands and we start doing our own. Or for example, is the solution for us to try and work with the government and try to infiltrate the government and put ourselves in those positions? So I don't know. I mean, it's a very difficult one that we have. How do we deal with problems that the ummah is having? Okay, Hassan Khan. You're gonna have to email me because I'll have to send you a link. So I don't know, is that a phone number? Is that just a random number that you just put up there? Just out of curiosity, how did you decide to get Naveed and Altaf on the podcast? Was it out of chance? No. So basically, Altaf used to be a radio broadcaster, presenter in Birmingham, right, for a very well-known radio station, and he used to have a prime time slot on Fridays. And then he finished that. And we've always been talking about starting our own sort of like little thing on the side, podcast or something on that lines. And Naveed, we just happened perchance to kind of like discuss this with him, and he was okay with it as well. And Naveed is a personality that, kind of can talk about all sorts of things, and he's very sort of like easy to get on with. So we thought, we'll come together, we'll discuss, topics, random topics. So we initially, basically, we tried to start like live podcasts. This was before COVID. We tried to do live podcasts where all three of us get together and we have a location and we do podcasts there. But the problem with that was, we unfortunately we were unable to, first of all, try to fix a date for where we could meet because our schedules were all over the place, and then we didn't really have the right equipment to be able to do the podcasts. And so when COVID happened, it was just it was just by chance that we thought, okay, let's start then. So okay, so right, Hassan, let's bring on Hassan then, inshallah, and let's see what Hassan's gonna say. Let me just say, like I said, if there are others, but if you are gonna come on, make sure you know what you're gonna be talking about. Yeah, so it's not just random. It's not just random things. We're gonna talk about things, problems, how we can resolve problems that we have. Okay, why is it not coming up? Right. Okay, Altaf is going to be coming on, inshallah ta'ala. He's just going to be a little bit late. So, like I said, when it comes to these kind of issues, I think the Muslims, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu, mashallah, Maji, where are the two shaitan? Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. Maji, why don't you come on? Yeah, we can have some insight. Yeah, you willing to come on? What do you say, bro? You think you're coming on? If you want to come on, let me know. I'll just text you the link. Yeah, and we can discuss regarding, what your sort of thoughts are on situation around the world at the moment, especially when it comes to France. Because I was actually interestingly looking up, reading on, because I had friends that were from France when I was studying in Pakistan, and they used to tell me like how difficult it is for them to practice Islam in France. And I used to think living in France is like similar to living in the UK. Like it's not much difficult. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ahla wa sahlan.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
MashaAllah, mashallah, Hassan. Ahla wa sahlan, ahla wa sahlan. Okay, guys, can you guys hear an echo? So this week I've been using my earphones, and as you can see, that's why I look a bit kind of cool today with my earphones in my ear. But I don't know. Can you guys hear Hassan? Is there an echo? Echo here.
Is it okay? I'm not quite sure how it is, to be fair.
Yeah, inshallah, should be good. Should be good. I can hear you, alhamdulillah, and I can't hear any echo.
Yes, that's fine. How you doing, Mufti Saab?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, Hassan. Very, very good to see you. Alhamdulillah. How's things in down your end? Are you in tier 2?
Tier 3 we're in. They're going to introduce tier 4. Situation is not good in Sheffield up South Yorkshire side, if I'm honest. But you just got to do. You don't know what's around the corner. I mean, we never knew that. I mean, I could talk a lot about politics and how they have approached the COVID situation in the country. And I personally feel like utter shambles, but I don't know if that's the topic for today's conversation.
So how have you been? Tell us, how have you been affected by the COVID? Like,
not much, to be honest. I think, to be honest, Sheikh, I think I do think it's there, obviously, and a lot of people do get it, and people do die from it and stuff like that. And so I'm sort of in the middle.
So are you a believer in the COVID?
Yes, of course I am. Of course I am believing in COVID.
Takbir, takbir.
Nare takbir, nare risalat. Sorry. So yeah, I am definitely a believer in the COVID. I know many people. Sadly, I know a couple of people that have passed away from it as well. One close uncle supposedly passed away of COVID, but it did seem like, because when he went on the ventilator, he died that night.
Okay.
So he was a
Subhanallah.
very close uncle of mine, and so
Yeah.
I'm
Allah
quite
give him Jannah.
skeptical. Alhamdulillah. Sorry. Allah grant him Jannah, and grant all of his family sabr. I mean, they're
Ameen.
coping well.
Ameen.
But yeah, COVID
I think, sorry, Hassan, I think a lot of people have experienced some, definitely financial sort of like burdens that people have experienced based on because of COVID. What I want to kind of more like get your view on is the more spiritual. Yeah, the spiritual sort of like what you've experienced, like for example, not being able to go to the mosque as easily as it was before, or for example, like attending gatherings in the masjid, or maybe even going for some dars, or these kind of like sort of like brotherhood experiences as well, where you go out with your friends for a meal, or you go for a retreat or somewhere. What would you kind of like see? How would you see that? What did you experience?
personally, Ramadan was a big, a lot, very, very different. But I would say even in Ramadan there was no masjid, and that was a massive loss in terms of the Taraweeh, the Mahol. Everyone, the brotherhood getting together and being together as an ummah in Ramadan, fasting together, motivating each other, and so that whole sort of family feeling you get from the masjid it wasn't there, and it's not there still. Still there's still problems. The problems I have sometimes in some masjids are more lenient with the rules than other masajid,
Mm,
and it's as though you want to go to that congregation, and obviously you want to be part of that congregation, but your principals don't let you due to the leniency of the rules, if that makes sense.
yeah.
But
I mean, so what you're basically kind of saying is that this is something which you have actually kind of definitely felt a spiritual what's the word for it? A spiritual deficiency
yeah, spiritual
because
deficiency,
of
100%. So because as soon as it like obviously the rules laid down, the first Jummah we prayed in the masjid, it was like an emotional kind of moment that look, we're going back to them and praying Jummah. I mean, people have difference of opinion on whether Jummah is farz in the first place in the country that we live in, but traditionally we believe that Jummah has a main part in the week. It's like a people go to the masjid, they read salah together. It's like people go for Durood Sharif majlis, people go for, like you were saying, dars. Like there's no substitute sitting in front of a teacher and learning from. I know first hand experience of that, and how lazy.
By the way,
I
guys,
put my
Hassan is a Hafiz of Quran, mashallah.
uh,
And Hassan does Naat Sazal Nasheed. So if anyone has any sort of requests, yeah, inshallah, we'll
same word
hear
like that.
maybe a minute or two, maybe of Hassan reading something.
Uh,
We'll ask that in a bit, inshallah. But just tell us, how did you get into Hifz of Quran, by the way?
so I was from a childhood. My grandfather, he was attached to the masjid, and so he'd like a caretaker of the masjid, and so he used to take me to the masjid, and I used to listen to people read, do bayans, and I used to, as a 6 or 7 year old, sit in the pulpit myself and start giving Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadi alladhina astafa. So I started doing, like, I was interested in religion from childhood.
So would
And
you say that the influence of your father, your grandfather,
grandfather, my
played a
family,
big role?
yeah. So growing up when I was a child, and then my grandfather passed away. It wasn't the grandfather that I was going with, but my grandfather passed away, and my brother started Hifz, and he was 12 at the time. He was
Okay.
12. He's 4 years older than me. So he was 12, I was 8 at the time. So I became more interested in thinking, oh, Hifz. Assalamu alaikum, Altaf bhai. How you doing?
MashaAllah, we got Brother Altaf here. And we've also got no echo. Altaf, I think I've sorted it out.
Have you sorted me out, Mufti Sahib, today?
I've sorted it out. I've sorted it
I'm
out.
gonna have to wait and see it. I'm gonna put my microphone on now.
Yeah, put it on, bro. Put all your microphones on. We got Brother Hassan here, Altaf, and Brother Hassan, inshallah, just telling us a little about of how he became a Hafiz, and he's going to read a naat for us. And I actually called today's session. I called it last minute change of plan. Last minute change.
subhanallah.
Allahu Akbar. Last minute change
MashaAllah.
of plan, yeah. So Hassan, if you can just give us a little bit more explanation about background about yourself, and then inshallah Nat, and then we're going to continue with the topic, inshallah.
Yeah. So I grew up, and well, I didn't. I was still 8 years old at the time. So I was 8 years old, and my brother started Hifz, and I was 8, so I was quite young, so I couldn't start at the time. But then a few months later down the line, I got a bit agitated and thought, you know what, I got a little bit Josh in me. It's quite empty Josh, but it's still Josh, as you know, Mufti Sahib, but we won't go down that road. So the empty Josh came to a peak towards the end of November in 2004. And the Ustad, Hazrat Maulana Shoaib Sahib, Hazrat Maulana Shoaib Desai Sahib, he came to my class at the time. And he said, who wants to go Hifz? And he was looking for elder students. I said, no, I'm going. He said, no, Putar, next year you go. I go, no, Ustadi, please, my brother's going, I'm going as well. He said, okay, no problem. So he took me upstairs that day. I went upstairs in the attic. So the middle floor at that time was the maktab, and the attic was the Hifz class. I started running up the stairs. Oh, I'm in Hifz class. Crazy nutter and all of that. So we went there, and 5 years long journey later, alhamdulillah, I became Hafiz in 2000 and
MashaAllah.
when did I become Hafiz? 2009.
Oh, mashallah,
Yeah.
alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Okay, so just one little thing. You know, a lot of people ask me, Hassan, what are there any like special tips for memorization that you would advise people? Because I'm not Hafiz of Quran. I did like about 3 or 4 juz, and then I just gave up, unfortunately. I don't know how much Altaf has memorized, but I was just doing something on the side. I just thought, you know what, I'll just do a little bit of memorization.
About 2.5 Mufti Sahib.
Oh, mashallah, mashallah. So what? Give us, Altaf. I want you to give me like what really helped you in trying to memorize, because I know in memorization you come to like a wall, right? You come to like this wall where you can't really go further ahead. So Hassan, give us some special advice.
So disclaimer here, I don't know how you went into madrasa and how you were in madrasa at the time, how strict your madrasa was at the time, and how lenient your madrasa was at the time. And I leave those details because obviously we're on a public forum at the minute. So it was a lot of that, if you know what I mean. But we in the mornings we had a strict timetable first of all. So our timetable, I think time is a massive thing with Hifz.
You mean punctuality or time of the day?
Just like times, like time of the day is another, but you've got to give it a big chunk of time.
Oh.
It's not one of those ones, Mufti Sahib, that I feel like if you give like, oh, it's like a 3 days a week kind of course. We did 4.5 hours every day, 5 days a week, and then we'd do about 5 or 6 hours on the Saturday. So it was full on. And that's how we became Hafiz. So we used to go before school, and
So what used to happen? Okay, so did you ever come to a situation where you kind of felt like giving up and you thought it's not progressing?
Many times.
So how did you overcome that?
Parental support, and then, to be honest, I thought, you know what, I've started now, so I might as well finish. It's one of those ones, and praise the Lord that I actually thought that way.
The way you said that, praise the Lord, I was thinking, what's this, bro?
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sorry.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, so sorry, I'm sorry for rushing you on because I've been trying to get back to the topic, but people have requested some things for you guys for you to sing. So Shazana B has said, it's Raheel. Can you do Dil Pakistan? And aspiring cog neuroscientist is saying, can you sing Al Wida, please? So you choose one and just try to do it in about a minute or two.
All right, okay. Mufti Sahib, listen though, I'm allowed to do that Dil Pakistan for you then, yeah? It's not a nasheed, it's Junaid Jamshed.
You can do whatever you like, my brother. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do my own choice, to be fair. I think that it's just easier when you've practiced your own stuff. I understand you've got yeah, okay, so I'll just get on with it because I haven't got much time. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin. कोई माने या ना माने मेरे रब का ये ऐलान है कोई माने या ना माने मेरे रब का ये ऐलान है सबसे ऊंची सबसे आला मेरे नबी की शान है अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला सय्यिदिना मुहम्मदी प्यारे आका कमली वाले जिधर से गुजरा करते थे प्यारे आका कमली वाले जिधर से गुजरा करते थे शजर गवाही देते थे हाँ शजर गवाही देते थे और पत्थर कलमा पढ़ते थे अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला सय्यिदिना मुहम्मदी अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला सय्यिदिना
Allah. Subhanallah, mashallah, jazakallah is very beautiful.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair.
Allah bless you. And in the blessed month of the in which the Prophet ﷺ was born as well. Alhamdulillah. So alhamdulillah. Okay, so let's carry on. Hassan, if you want to stay, you can stay, inshallah, and you can have some input maybe in some discussion.
Is that okay, guys? I don't mind. I don't mind going and.
No, it's fine. If you can give some input, that'd be excellent, inshallah. What? Okay, so so the topic today was initially regarding the issue in France and regarding school dinners as well. So I think these two, I personally think it's a very tricky, very tricky issue because, especially the France one, because it's not as simple as you just pressing a button and everything will just go back to normal again. Because what's normal for us is not what's normal for the people of France. And I was mentioning before you came, I was mentioning about, I had friends when I was studying in Pakistan, and they were from France. I had to put that in there. So when they were from France, and they would tell me like really strange things about how Muslims have to live in France and the way that they're mistreated in France. And it was like the guy used to tell me that we're from Paris, and I said, "Whoa, Paris is a really supposedly posh place." And he goes, "No, actually, we're most of Paris is a ghetto where we live. The North Africans, Arabs, North Africans, Tunisians, Algerians, people from Chad and all these other countries, West Africa. He goes, a lot of these places are really run down, and poverty." And then with poverty, you have all these other things, unfortunately, that follow on drugs and gangs and, all these other problems. This is like a very, very common thing over there. And for a person to be able to practice their religion, for a person to be able to, freely practice their religion is very difficult. Not like England, because in England, I mean, we know it's like you don't really, you rarely come across a situation where a mosque will be closed down. Like, I probably never heard of any situation where a mosque has actually permanently closed down in the UK, apart from like certain mosques that were temporarily closed due to whatever reason. Over there, it's like common for this government to crack down and just close a mosque, right? Without a reason. And then, the way that the policy is set up, the way that I was speaking to one of my students who's a solicitor and he's actually a barrister and he's a judge. So he was telling me, he goes, the way that the law is set up in France, it is just so easy for the judge to interpret the law in his own way. You can't do that in the UK. Like in the UK, you can never get away with it. The judges can't get away with that. But in France, he said, he gave an example of the case of the Burkini. If you remember a few years ago, there was a lady and she went to, and they kind of like, I think they fined her or something like that because of what she was wearing. And it was nothing wrong with it. But they've always been trying, the government has always over there apparently been trying to crack down on religious symbolism. Right, so religious symbols, religious signs, and it's not just with Muslims. They'll be doing it with everyone else, but because Muslims are quite vocal usually in how things are being done against them, and Muslims are very traditional in the way that they uphold their religion. You see it more in the Muslim community, and maybe we're Muslim, so the Muslim news sort of like isn't filtered out for us. We kind of it resonates with us as well. So I mean, for me, I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, Altaf?
I think first and foremost, I think it's kind of like just saying that what's happening or what appears to be happening in France at this moment seems to be like very, very complex, right? In as much as that there've been like three attacks where people have passed away, right? And first and foremost, I think it's kind of like just stating that the people that commit acts like this, have made enemies of both Muslims and non-Muslims. It's not as if it's just it's an attack on everybody, right? And so kind of that's the one piece, and I think it's just having that the empathy in this moment for that, because I think that's important, that we have to kind of like realize that this is taking place. I think it comes against a backdrop where where it's incredible that a president has made moves or taken stances that have been like really aggressive towards the community before the attack took place today, have been really, really aggressive towards the community. And I think you've seen an outpouring of, even online, like an outpouring of people kind of defending and showing love for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And I think that we have to kind of like, we have to clearly demarcate these two things. And for those people that have done these things, there might not be a difference between them. But we're saying there is a clear distinction here. Is that our, and this is why it becomes really complicated, because it's an ongoing thing. And even today, there was another unfortunate attack taking place. In
two attacks, wasn't there? 2 attacks.
Was it 2? I only read about the one
places.
in Nice. Or was it in 2 different places?
Yeah.
And like things like that, they just you just look at those kind of things and you think to yourself, like, how do we make sense of this? And I think that's what people are trying to do at this moment in time. They're trying to make sense of this, but at the same time, I think for those, especially that are Muslim, they feel really, really horrified. They feel empathetic towards this, but at the same time, they're thinking, and this is where the confusion or the cloudiness or the fog comes, is that they feel under attack as well. And I think that's where that's where it's playing out at the moment, and that's what we're seeing. So I don't have like a definitive answer or a definitive opinion on this. I think kind of like just focusing on what's happening in France, and I think that's where we're seeing that. And I think before today's attack, if you're kind of
sorry, just to stop you there, do you think that because France is a Western country and this kind of thing happening in a Western country would obviously be given more, media attention, whereas, for example, reckless killings that take place anywhere around the world at the moment isn't given the same attention that a Western country would be given. So, for example, like in Pakistan a few days ago, there was a madrasa where there was someone, I think it was a suicide bombing or something. I don't know, some bombing took place or something, and so many people had been injured and killed. And even before that, there was some other attacks that took place as well in other places. And then you got other parts of the world. So it's like, I think these kind of reckless things are happening in a lot of places. And what tends to happen, I personally kind of see, is that there seems to be a pattern of how it happens. It's like an illness. It's like it's like a sickness, a virus that's spreading. So you have, in certain places, people are legitimizing that because it's happening in this part of the world, because it's happening in this part of the world, okay, now, we can take things in our own hands and we can carry these acts out. And as long as we're doing it as long as our intentions are for Allah, like as long as my intention is for the sake of Allah, then everything becomes justified. Yeah, because it's like an eye for an eye, one of those kind of ones. And what you said earlier on, I think that's a very important point, which is when leaders make statements that instill inside the hearts of the people racism or some sort of other Islamophobia or whatever, I think that is the biggest problem that we have with this problem. Because where other places, where you see attacks happening other places, the leader does not like take support of doesn't support the kind of like status
It doesn't
quo.
openly come out there and blame an entire community. That's the kind of thing in it, and that's what we're kind of like labeling this at, is that it's come across against an entire community, and I think there's that confusion as to how you react in this situation and in this circumstance. And I don't mean in the fact of the attacks that have taken place. Obviously, kind of like those are completely wrong. But in terms of like how are you meant to react? Just from the UK, Mufti Saab, if somebody dishonors the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how are you individual meant to react? And I think that's the question that people are kind of like saying, okay, in this day and age, how do you react? Do you boycott goods? Which you can justify, which you can make sense of. We live in a capitalist structure or society. If you hit somebody's pocket, you're going to make a point. So should we do it through those means? Should we just do it by just expressing our love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in an open manner? How do you react in that situation? And I think kind of like that's the thing that you're seeing. And I read some of it, not too abreast of kind of like what's happening in France, to be honest. But kind of like just reading up a few things and having a look, and unfortunately this has been like systemic of stuff that's been taking place over the last 20 years, right? So I kind of like want to think how and I think people are asking as well, is that, and I don't think it's a question for you, Mufti Saab, as well, because I think it's like a very complicated answer to this in terms of how you respond directly to to where people are kind of speaking against the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I think in this month of all months as well, where the expression of love is there anyway.
Definitely. I totally agree with how you're kind of like going about it, which is we don't really have a solution for this. It's not like a black and white fiqh masala, like if you make a salat mistake in your salat, how do you rectify it? It's not one of those kind of issues. The issue is definitely we do find in Muslim history, we find situations where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's honor was attacked, or he was blasphemed, or any sort of like thing that happened. And we do find cases of certain rulers taking this as being an act of treason by its citizens, and then giving the capital punishment. The problem arises is when people can't differentiate between the acts of a government, like a Muslim government in the past, and between individuals trying to do vigilantism. I think that's where you have a big issue here. So, for example, like if you remember in Pakistan, this is like a very, unfortunately, like a very common thing that we find in Pakistan. That is that in Pakistan, if someone is basically just accused of blaspheming the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some random person, just turns up and kills that person. Now, you cannot have you can't have any law in a country if people don't respect the government, the policies. So if people are going to take the law into their own hands, you are going to have situations where you're going to be causing chaos. Because now what's going to happen now is if one guy kills someone who apparently blasphemed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because it has to be ascertained by the courts. Has it really happened? Is the guy ill? Is the guy mentally unwell? Did the guy say this? Like we have many examples in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some Sahaba used to criticize the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but then when they accepted Islam, it was like all of a sudden they became people who are now so in love with the Prophet ﷺ's character. Yeah. So, and then you get this kind of like people who are praising the murderer, right? But then at the same time, someone will say to you, well, didn't he do something wrong? Isn't it wrong what he done? Doesn't it justify, right? And then you're kind of saying to yourself, well, now this has opened the doors for other people now. If they think their neighbor has blasphemed the Prophet ﷺ, why are they going to not go to that person's house and attack them? And then it becomes subjective, and eventually it just becomes something which is chaotic, and it just leads to chaos. And I think that's why, for example, like in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, it's a very difficult thing to try and filter out, because people are not looking at it contextually, and they're not looking at it. I mean, the other issue that's raised over here is, how do you deal with this thing? Because it's clearly wrong. You know, governments around the world, any country that does do something which is a direct attack against another government, there's policies in place, right? What do you do? I mean, at the moment, the only kind of steps that have been taken is boycotting. Seems as though Muslims, the only things that they can really do is to boycott. And so you got, you know, Erdogan telling his people to boycott, and then you got some other Muslim countries who are saying, and when at the same time, you have people out there who are saying, well, isn't boycotting going to be harming them in the Muslim countries? Isn't boycotting going to be harming the business traders, the Muslim business traders, right? And then at the same time, you got the issue, well, shouldn't the Muslim business traders have at least that much honor for the Prophet ﷺ that they are willing to compromise some of their income for the Prophet ﷺ's sake, to harm the markets, the financial markets of a particular country? So it's a very tricky one. Like, everything's so interconnected that I don't know how do you kind of, like, in this time and in age. I mean, you can imagine in the past, someone blasphemed someone, and whether it was you know, European Rome, or whether it was someone else, the Muslims. It's like, what would happen in them days? There'd be a war, yeah, there'd be a clash, and that's how they sort it out. And now they don't really resort to that anymore, because now the wars are not going to be like a war in the past. They are going to destroy, like, you know, there's going to be nuclear power involved, and there's going to be all sorts of, you know, consequences and collateral damage.
Yeah, I think that's where it's where you have a level of complexity, and people kind of like trying to look for answers into how you react, and especially where you get so complicated that there are, you know, attacks and things like that taking place at the same time. And I think that creates you know, a difficult layer of complexity in dealing with any of the issues, because now you're just dealing with that part of it. And you have to show you know, we as people have to show a level of empathy to what's happened. Do you mean we can't kind of like just detach ourselves from that fact? And I think kind of like sometimes what people raise is, oh, but this is happening elsewhere in the world as well. So look what's happening in Nigeria at this moment in time. Look what, you know, some of the things that happen in Pakistan, in Syria, in different places. And I think, like, one of the things that always like astonishes me, and I kind of like sometimes take a step back from this. Take the story of Khabib over the weekend, Mufti Sahib. Right, it was a story that affected the world, but it was a story that you know, that Muslims took particular pride in. And the reason we took particular pride in that was because we have a you know, we have a bond of faith. But people have bonds of identity, people have bonds of location, people have bonds of geography, people have historical relationships and links to different parts of the world. So like the UK and France have a close relationship. So you're going to hear more about incidents that take place that in places that are geographically closer, or that have a close relationship.
But
I don't think it's about undermining
the only
anything.
issue I would have, the only issue I would have with that is, for example, like the cases of acts of murder or killing against Muslims is not given the same media attention as the ones that Muslims carry out. So there is a bias towards attacks that are carried out by Muslims.
Undoubtedly, there's that bias that exists. Undoubtedly, there's that bias that exists, and there's no kind of like getting away from that fact where a person is called, you know, what happened in New Zealand or places like that. Person is simply called somebody who's ill, or they start telling empathetic stories about that individual or whatever else. Those things most definitely are prevalent, and they're evidenced as well. But I think kind of like when I look at it from that perspective, Mustab, is that I would say as Muslims, do we really hear about deaths of non-Muslims taking place across the world? Not at the hands of Muslims, just death. Because what you're talking about is the sanctity of life, right? And what we're saying is important is the sanctity of life, and what we're saying is the thing that we should all hold sacred is that one thing.
Definitely.
So we don't hear about what things are taking place across the world. Like, to be honest, most of us don't even know what's happening in places like Nigeria at this moment in time, where the government have kind of like turned on its people. Like, most of us probably don't know what's happening.
Was that the last week, the killings? The
yeah. People don't know what's happening in Central African Republic. Do you know what I mean? Like, those things that were historically taking place there. What happened in South America in terms of like the vast movement of people from Bolivia, Venezuela, and places like that. Like, what was happening there? Like, we don't pay attention to those. So there's a level of balance as well. So I definitely think there's disproportionate way of looking at things, which we kind of can see. But at the same time, is like, are we really concerned about the sanctity of life everywhere?
Yeah, and I think the other issue, which I think a lot of people are unaware of, is the sort of the philosophy and principles upon which France is founded. Yeah, the kind of the political parties.
Yeah,
the political parties. So it's like they kind of are. They have this sort of way that they approach life as their culture. They want to preserve it as much as possible. So I was actually speaking to someone. They were saying France actually did not allow McDonald's into France until way after, many decades later, like in the 50s or 60s or something like that. And the reason was because they knew that they used to call it, what did they call it? I don't know, the company mistress or something. I don't know what they call it, something kind of like very sort of like, so basically what they said was that these companies, they get access to your country and then they change your culture. So this was a burger culture. It's not just a company that's trying to make money. It's actually infiltrating the people and it's changing their mind. They didn't want that. So these people from day one have been very, very particular about observing and upholding their so-called, values. They have their values. And this is why they feel that Muslims having symbols, and they even, do this with not Christians as well and Jews as well, that they ban symbols, religious symbols in public places. News of this came in the past years, and recently it's been about scarf and niqab and these kind of things. I think it's like, how do you deal with secularism? Knowing that secularism is designed to control religion. In the past, the religion was the one that was controlling the government, and it was dictating to the government of how policies should be made. And now you're in a situation where religion is slowly being sidelined. It's like, well, if you want to have religion, you do it in your own places. But if you want to, abide by what we say, then we're going to come out with our own rules, and religion has to sort of succumb to our way of. So this is generally around the world. This is slowly what's starting to happen with Western governments. That's how it's being seen. I mean, America would probably be more religious, compared to, for example, the UK maybe, or maybe many countries in Europe. I don't know what's your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think they're kind of like. I was watching.
Hassan. Do you have anything to say here?
One thing was about the approach of how you go about the dealing with the situation. What do you think of the situation of Malaysia? Of how they've given a Shamil book. I know it's a small token.
Yeah.
But what do you think to that kind of approach in order to deal with? I mean, on a smaller scale, if we look, I know we're kind of talking about geographically and globally here, right? But if we talk about, because even in our own country, if we put it in UK, Birmingham, Sheffield, we have a majority white community around us. Now it tells us that this kind of opportunity, and how can we sort of educate or understand each other's perspective more than anything? Well, so the first point was Malaysia's approach of sending like a Shamil, and other one is educating or understanding the different perspectives. Because I personally feel like eye for an eye type of kind of attitude and approach
Mm.
in this kind of climate that we have is not productive. I don't think it's productive.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think the Malaysian approach was quite productive as well, because
Okay.
along with the Shama'il, they also kind of like tweeted out, a few tweets the Prime Minister did in it, and what he was trying to do was get across a very complicated and nuanced kind of a discussion. And
What was that?
one of his tweets, Mufti Saab, just came along like, Muslims have
Oh,
the
was that
right.
Mahathir? Mahathir.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I've seen that one.
And you look at that tweet and you're just like, okay, like, wow,
Yeah.
you sent the Shama'il with one hand, and then you've got this tweeted around the world, which is kind of like, kind of showing that imbalance. I think there's a point of, there is a point of reaching out and having that discussion. I think there is that point where what you're talking about in terms of looking at each other's, trying to understand a little bit more. But this isn't something that's new. This, people know the positions. I think it is a case of trying. Sometimes what you try to do is let the moment
Sorry,
pass and then
Hassan,
have the
I think there's
conversation.
some mic noise coming from your.
Is it mine?
I
Is
don't-
that where it's coming from? I really apologize
Yeah.
about that. Wait, hold on. Let me just let me try plugging in my headphones. If I plug in my headphones, it might
Yeah.
take away all the
Might
background noise. Give me a second.
Yeah.
So
So
I think it
sorry,
becomes.
you know that.
Sorry,
So what were you saying again with regards to the Malaysian approach?
So the Malaysian approach, I think, kind of like at one stage was giving the Shama'il, and making that statement, because that's a PR statement, isn't it? That's a statement of that, we need to have a more understanding.
At least we've tried something. At least we've tried like a peaceful approach.
Yeah, it's like that approach, like, we wanna have conversation, and you're getting it all wrong. Like, let's have conversation. That's a good PR move generally, but that PR move's clouded, right? Because
But I don't think they
on-
would I don't think they would send a Bible to, because I think that the sending of the Shama'il itself, I understand what you're saying.
it's just a
but I
PR. It's
think-
PR Mufti Saab. It's nothing else.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
'Cause when I
So
first saw that,
so it's not productive. Do you not think?
No, I think it is productive. I think in this kind of a moment, you have to do things which are simple to understand, and that get the right type of message across. And I think giving the Shama'il is kind of, one of those nice things that you can do, and it is a PR move to kind of move into that kind of a direction, that you can have that human face to face kind of like, be in that space, which somebody's just mentioning as well. But at the same time, kind of like then they're getting that mixed up with your tweets. It's like a whole PR kind of campaign from the Malaysia instance I'm talking about
Okay,
directly.
so if we take a different approach in terms of you touched upon about Habib, like sometimes other ideologies that are not sort of understood or tolerated, they seem to be alienated. So they're alienated to different kind of people. So like, for example, okay, if that PR it's a PR move and it isn't very productive, this
No,
kind of-
I think, brother, the PR move is productive. I think what happens is that the PR move is about giving that over, and that's really kind of does work because it's simple, it's easy to understand for everybody. Everybody gets it, right? But I said what I'm saying is that at the same time as making that PR move, you can't go and have a Twitter outburst.
Twitter outburst. That was the problem. But
Do you
Habib
know what I
also
mean?
does
but
a-
wasn't
does
it?
a- does a good- does a
Sorry,
good- does a
wasn't
good
it from
job,
two
though.
different people? Wasn't it from two different people?
I think it was from people from within the agency and the state. So I saw it as that, like,
but
it comes
they're
from
like
the
two
state.
different personalities.
I think it comes from the state, though, in Mufti Saab, is the message is coming from the state. It's not like people will look at the differences of where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because
the other thing is, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't heard the Taliban say anything. I don't know if I've not kind of been too. I mean, usually you'd expect them, because they've kind of got the upper hand over Western sort of, because due to the military situation that they had, they haven't really kind of like spoken out, or haven't really heard
no,
in that kind of, because normally they're the ones that usually will say make a kind of statement in these situations. So it's interesting how different Muslim countries are reacting to this, because what tends to happen in politics, I think you mentioned this before, Altaf, is usually behind the scenes there are so many sort of like agreements and contracts that the governments have signed to, and are working long-term contracts. You can't simply just kind of say, right, this country we're boycotting you, because you already made so many plans with them, and they're not in the thousands, they're like in the billions of dollars worth of contracts.
Yeah,
So
there's like the rice contract with Egypt, the food contract that Egypt had at one stage with the Americans, and like all these kind of different things that take place in the background that you just don't know about. Because everybody just looks at. I think we fall in this kind of syndrome where we want everybody to stand up for everything without understanding the complexity of what people are actually dealing with. Sometimes it's not that complex as well, though, because like Imran Khan and Erdogan and people like that have kind of like made statements, made appropriate statements. But I think sometimes it's just I think sometimes it's just a little bit more complex than sometimes we try to let on to, and you can't stand for everything all the time. Because you don't have that ability for strength. So the confusion comes here, Mufti Saab, is that what happens is people, when you don't stand up for everything, they think there's a weakness in your iman.
Like,
So they think,
if you don't make a Facebook post or a Instagram post, if you figure, especially for Mufti Saab himself, because he's a figure, and if he doesn't say anything about Nigeria, or he doesn't say anything, no, this is a way to say this is a way. But if he doesn't,
interestingly, let me tell you something. Interestingly, I was speaking to an imam once, and he goes to me, he goes, in Jummah, he goes, this like many years ago, he was doing the khutbah, and then he gave a dua, he made a dua, and in the dua he said, oh Allah help Kashmir, oh Allah help Afghanistan, oh Allah help the Muslims of this country. He goes, a guy stood up after he finished. He goes, why did you mention this country as well? So the guy goes, how many countries am I supposed to learn, right, that I have to make dua for everyone? So it's like some people are so sensitive that if you don't like highlight, or if you don't mention a particular sort of situation happening in the world, they feel as though you don't care for it.
Sheikh, just tell him I've mentioned it. وَغَيْرِهَا مِنَ الْبُلْدَانِ. Now I don't know where Buldan is. Is it a place or anything? But he doesn't understand it either. So you could just tell him that Buldan means the whole
the
world.
point. I mean,
So,
the point is that how people sort of like every single individual has made up their own mind about how things should run in the world.
Yeah.
What the ultimate solution is. But it doesn't work like that. Like if you think about it, Umar radiallahu anhu, this is a good example. So the Treaty of Hudaybiyah in the 6th year was written, right? And the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was absolutely biased towards the people of Mecca and against the Muslims. And part of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah was that Muslims are not allowed to do Umrah this year, go back home. Anyone who accepts Islam in Mecca is not allowed to migrate to Medina without the permission of the families in Mecca, which no family is going to give permission. And the Prophet said, okay, it's fine. And anyone who wishes to leave Islam from Medina can go to Mecca without anyone's permission. It was very unfair. The Prophet still signed it. He agreed to it. And then what happened, interestingly, this is what happened. Umar radiallahu anhu, post signing of the contract, Umar radiallahu said to Abu Bakr, isn't this unfair? Like, aren't we right? Aren't we on the truth? Don't we have the right to this? Why is it that the treaty is written against us? So he just said, look, Allah and His Prophet also know best. Leave it to them. And then it was like a few years later when Umar radiallahu saw the long-term benefits of this. He just said, you know what? Umar is wrong and the Prophet is right. He just realized. So sometimes what tends to happen, we kind of fall in this Umar radiallahu anhu sort of like situation, I say. And a lot of us will see something that happens on the media, and immediately it's like, you know what? This, I'm surprised no one said, how comes Khabib after his talk didn't mention anything about this? I'm surprised. Like normally you'd hear people on social media saying, Khabib should have said something. Yeah, it's like,
we've got a warped understanding of what success is.
Oh wow, that's open a massive can of worms of hope and happiness and success and all philosophical debates. Oh wow,
I thought you were gonna praise him there.
I know, man.
It's a big question. How do people view happiness, success, understanding?
I think from an Islamic perspective, we've just deformed our understanding of what it means for success. Success is about worshipping, right, and staying in that state of worship and that constant, consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and kind of like that's what success is. So like when you then start to move things, that success is about gaining movement, power, traction within the world. I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? I'm
bhai,
not sure. I'm not sure
my
whether those two
success,
things are
my
kind of related.
success, my success and your success lies in the 6 points of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Come on, brother. Don't do that, bro. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
I
Mashallah,
mean,
So,
see,
mashallah.
that is actually a very, very valid sort of like point that you raised there, because even amongst the Muslims themselves, like you have different sort of like organizations and different movements, and each one of them sort of
hi.
like has their own understanding of how we should deal with things. Like for example, like there might be some without mentioning names and things, there might be some movements who might say, for example, our solution is just to have a Muslim leader. And there might be some movements who might say our solution is just to make dua for them, and show them kindness, show them your character, and they'll accept Islam, or they'll show kindness towards Muslims. Some people's argument might be because a lot of people are not praying their salat. This is what's going to happen, and they'll quote hadith, right? And there might be some people who are saying things like, well, Muslims shouldn't live there. Why are Muslims living in these kind of countries for? So I think people are going to be definitely coming out with their own sort of philosophies, yeah, of how we're gonna deal with this situation. Okay.
I think on that point, I like to mention a point of the way Masjid al-Aqsa is in a point of one sheikh once mentioned that he read a book on the virtues of Masjid al-Aqsa, or the protection of Masjid al-Aqsa, and the way that people sort of understanding is, you're correct that there's one leader, and some people argue it's because of the actions of the Muslims. I mean, it makes sense a little bit, but I don't want to be biased towards any sort of points on the podcast. But he says that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect Makkah and Mukarramah, but the Masjid al-Aqsa will be to the actions of the people at the time, the state of the time. So the worse the state of the people at the time, the worse the situation of Masjid al-Aqsa. But then it points the question, the situation of the Ummah is going to gradually get worse towards the end of time, and so that means that we're never going to get a point where we're going to get sort of tranquility within Masjid al-Aqsa, if that makes sense, Mufti Saab. So there's always pros and cons to each sort of point that you mentioned there.
Yeah, I mean, see, again, it's all. I mean, I see this as all people just trying to take individual sort of their understanding of Islam, and they're just trying to superimpose it onto this is the ultimate key to success. But like I said in the beginning, this is like a multi-layered problem we've got in society.
Yeah.
It's not just one problem. And a lot of the problems, it's like, there was this thing on social media. It was like they had a little pie chart, and they had a little slice of the pie chart, and they said, this is what we know. And then they have a little slice next to it saying, this is what we know we don't know. And then they had the majority of it saying, this is what we don't even know that we don't know.
Wow.
So I think a lot of what tends to happen with Muslims is we kind of jump to conclusions a lot. We're very sort of like naive in how we approach world sort of like problems. We don't understand the complexity, and then we don't ask the experts, people who are experts out there. We don't try to get their opinion. Altaf, any sort of like.
Yeah, somebody's just written a comment, I think, kind of just saying, is it inevitable, the decline? And it's like, well, you can only know you're declining if you know what the trajectory was before.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You don't know whether you're in a decline or in an ascendance at any one stage, and kind of like, on the different things that you could be at different points on different ones. So like, the fact that actually there probably are more people that are actually practicing within the UK now. From a Muslim perspective, that there are more visibly practicing Muslims in this day and age. So I think kind of like, what you say decline and incline is something that probably needs more thought. But in terms of kind of like what you're saying, Mufti Saab, it was upward before meeting Mufti. Which one? The one that comes on Monday nights? No, I'm joking. So in terms of in terms of he knows I love him. In terms of what you're saying, Mufti Saab, it's I think what we discussed last week is, for me, it's just kind of like always, one of those things that I'm keep on identifying, is that we haven't become comfortable in our own skins worshipping Allah. Like we're trying to superimpose other cultures, other identities on top of us, and we still haven't found that level of comfort with being a minority within the UK and just being at ease with that. and being at ease of worshipping Allah without having to superimpose another culture on top of it.
I think
And I think
I think a big point on that. Just sorry to disturb you on that point.
no,
But
no,
I
no,
think
Karen.
I think a big point on that, Altaf, Bhai, is the fact that who are we? It's a question, isn't it? Because we are. I don't know if you're second generation. I'm first generation. And who are we? Are we Pakistani? Are we British? Where do we line on the scale on the between British Pakistani or Pakistani British? Who are we? Right. But then it also goes deeper, and you start to think, like he said, is our religion, is our worship
By the way,
cultural
Altaf's not
baggage?
Pakistani. Okay,
I know
Altaf's
that
not
he's Bengali. I know he's Bengali. I know that.
Allah Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
I'm Gujarati, brother.
Are you Gujarati?
Astaghfirullah. See, that's what happens, Mufti Sahib. You know, these are called perpetual judgments or
Sorry.
stereotyping on skin
Allah.
color, Mufti Sahib.
Bhai, there's
One or
nothing
the
wrong
other.
with being Bengali, bhai. There's nothing wrong with being Gujarati.
I
There's
didn't
nothing wrong
say
with
that. I
being...
just said it was a perpetual judgment
really-
and
I
stereotyping, Mufti Sahib.
Sorry, I like to laugh in a joke. I apologize. I really do. I don't mean any harm by it.
This is going to be
Balani
remembered
bhai
now.
Balani
This is
bhai
going to be
Balani.
this is going to be taken as a small little
I'm
clip.
a Bengali. Did you know, Altaf?
Huh?
I'm a Bengali. Did you know?
What, West Bengali? From
Oh, wow. Now you're making a perpetual judgment.
Okay, all right. So,
all right.
you know, the other thing that we were going to talk about is the problem. So, I mean, this is obviously the France issue is not going to be resolved, and the way things are going is, I mean, ultimately there needs to be some sort of a unification of the Muslims themselves of how they're going to deal with things, right? Because if people are just going to come out with their own solutions, Erdogan's going to come out with their own solution, and Imran Khan with his own, and then the Arabs with their own, you know, we're not really going to come out with something which is going to be right.
The international response of a backlash is fine. In terms of the international response of an economic boycott is a choice or an option people are going to make. So that's going to run its course. In terms of the people and the Muslims in France, I think there needs to be that open and inclusive dialogue between the leadership and those Muslims, because there are like loads of them that are totally disgusted and angered by what's happening.
I've spoken to people. They said they don't even want to listen. That's the problem. They're not even bothered. Like I was watching this documentary, and they were saying the guy in France was saying basically goes, you know, in this whole road, they don't allow a Muslim shop. They don't allow it. Basically, Arab or African, they do not allow it at all. And he goes, this is deliberately. This is not done by the government. This is actually an owner who owns all this block, and he doesn't want it there. So it's like. It seems to be something which is, you know, in these people. I think Maji mentioned it early on as well. He was saying that historically France government has shown a lot of racism towards various groups. I mean, we're not talking about the atrocities that they committed in Algeria. We're not talking about, you know, what they've done around the world, including other, you know, European countries as well. But I think people need to understand that, you know, the kind of government that they've got, and then, you know, using I saw on social media they were kind of bringing up Macron. Was it Macron? Yeah, is it Macron or Macron? Macron's past about he was 15 years old and he fell in love with his teacher and these kind of. I mean, personally, I don't think it's something which, as Muslims, you're going to highlight. What's the point of highlighting this? Right? There are people out there who do not care about their life of fornication. They don't care about and having affairs. They don't care about these kind of things in the public light. So it's like bringing up the past of these individuals isn't really going to kind of change anything in the minds of the Muslims, right? It's sufficient as Muslims to understand that, okay, blaspheming the Prophet ﷺ is totally abhorrent, and this is something we are totally against. But now the next step, what's the next step then? Like, what's a long-term next step that we can take to be able to, you know, what's going to happen? Because after a few weeks, this is just going to disappear. And then Charlie Hebdo is going to make another cartoon, right? And or the government might even, you know, encourage it. And then what's going to happen? How are you going to deal with all this? And the other issue is okay, is it possible that the French president is using this as a way of, you know, boosting his own popularity amongst the people? Because they're saying that at the moment, you know, recently, if you remember a couple of months ago with the Yellow Jackets. The Yellow Jackets, remember the riots, the Yellow Jacket riots?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, there's hardly any news on it. Yeah, but it was like nearly every weekend there were these protests happening in France by people who were, I think, was it working class or I don't know, which was civil engineer, civil services or something like that. I don't know who he was. But these things were happening there as well. So there's so many things happening in France people don't even realize. And this is
Is
just
that
like one of
movement
the.
against immigration and all of that kind of stuff as well? That sentiment against immigration and the dangers of immigration, and that hostility that kind of like leans more towards your far right kind of like ideological thinking. So what you sometimes have to do is kind of reposition yourself on the political spectrum so that you appeal to more people in it, which is what you're saying, Mufti Saab, in essence. I think that's interesting, Mustafa. I wanted to move the conversation on before we go on to school dinners and poverty within the UK. One of the things I wanted to go to, Mustafa, is obviously there's been a massive event that took place on the weekend that reinforced the belief of many kind of non-practicing Muslims, and at the same time enraged about 5 Mulvis on my Facebook timeline, which was Khabib and this whole thing about MMA. Is like when a Muslim does something bad or haram, but is such a good and noble character, is it something that we should celebrate? Is it something we should talk about, or should we completely, turn a blind eye to him and pretend, he's not happening and just talk about the 6
Have you
points?
forget that? Have you seen? I always look at this. Have you seen how many small little sort of like posters, like these little posters they've made of Habib?
And his dad,
Not the
and his father
memes.
passed away.
All sorts of things. Him with wings, him
Yeah.
with like a lion next to him with like his father, him like doing that kind of that bird thing that he was doing when he was attacking Dana White.
Dylan Dennis.
Yeah, and it's like you're thinking to yourself, like, is it Muslim become sensationalized? Is it because everyone's doing it, so everyone thinks I've got to get into, I've got to say something about Khabib, and you see like everyone just praising him, like well-known scholars as well on their posts praising him, and so you kind of like in a situation. Shall I say something? Shall I? Shall I type something up? Yeah, will I regret it later?
I had
Me personally.
Well, this
I don't
there's
put
all-
anything on my Facebook.
Okay, fair dues. I think sometimes because people are hyped up in their emotions, I think trying to put a fiqh masala at that point where the emotions are up here and your iman has been reinforced through that, I think that's not a very tact thing to do. Where emotions are all high. If you want to talk about a few days later the fiqh masala, right? Not many people will listen to you on your fiqh masalas. They don't listen to you in fiqh masala how to pray namaz, which is farz. And then they want to listen to you when, because people are on that bandwagon. People are emotional. Like you were saying, people are
But I
non-practicing
think
Muslims.
sorry, Hassan, I think the problem is those people who deem, for example, MMA, it's not an agreed upon sort of like fatwa in the Quran and Sunnah that this particular action is totally wrong, right? It's we're talking about
punching in the face
UFC.
is-
We're talking about UFC, professional, highest level. That's what we're talking about, are we? We're not talking about like you go to the local gym and just doing it sparring.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
We're talking about, is punching in the face totally impermissible? That's the thing that everybody's hung up on it when it comes to UFC. Nobody cares about what happens. Nobody cares about the music, or nobody cares about anything like that. Mufti Saab. All they care about is
Or the
can you or
thighs
can't you
showing,
punch the guy in the
or
face.
the thighs showing, or anything like that.
Yeah. We're all Malikis when it happens.
But the point is, what I'm saying. I mean, someone asked this question to me on one of my live streams. I said, look, I personally, my position is that UFC fighting at the highest level, professional fighting, is not allowed. I say it's not allowed because it's clearly physically harming another person, right? Just to make money, and it's not like, for example, to gain some sort of like political gain through wars or anything like that. It's actually just to make loads of money, pure entertainment, hitting in the face at a UFC level. I personally say, look, it's not allowed because I can't find. It's like smoking. If someone smokes so many cigarettes that the doctors told them that most likely, this is going to cause you cancer, it wouldn't be allowed for them,
What's
right?
up?
So anyway, so listen. So what happened was, so this guy he goes, but then if you're saying that MMA is allowed, I said, look, I'm not saying it's allowed. I'm not saying it's allowed. What I'm saying is those people that are doing it themselves, that's between them and Allah, right? That's something totally between them and Allah. He goes, okay, then if you're saying that, okay, to a degree MMA is allowed, which I think is okay if you're not doing it at a professional level and you're not really going to, because the thing with MMA is that you train yourself, because I've done it. You train yourself to protect your face. That's one of the first things you train, how to hold your arms. So these guys, it's not like hitting an average guy on the street. When the hadith mentions about hitting of the face, you know it's a situation. If you're in a battlefield and you know you're gonna hit the enemy, and the guy goes, "What, my face?" You know what you guys say about the face. So hit anywhere else. No one's gonna, you probably just throw the spear in their head or something. Obviously I don't want to become too sort of like explicit in that. But the point I'm making is it's not a clear sort of hadith of what the situation applies to. So he goes to me then, what about
sparring, right, Mufti Sahib?
I'm talking about
talking about-
non ultimate professional. So below
you're
professional level.
Yeah.
Yeah, where like if you go into the ring and you're sparring, you're trying to build yourself up. The aim is not to harm the other person. But if you're going in the ring for money, UFC at the highest level, you are only going there to knock the heck out the guy and just make the money. That's all you want to do. You don't want to train yourself up. That's the issue. That's the issue with it.
But my issue with this, Mufti Sahib, it's not the.
So sorry. No. What I'm saying to you is, look, the guy said, then if you're saying MMA is allowed and this is allowed, he said, what about a woman, a Muslim woman, turning up to Miss World? If that's wrong and that's wrong, why don't people support Miss World? And I was saying, look, you don't understand. I say Miss World, this is something categorically in the Quran of a person, exposing themselves is wrong. What I'm saying to you, there is hitting of the face. It's not a clear-cut issue of what do they mean by hitting of the face. There are scenarios, there are situations, yeah. And the two different masalas, you can't draw analogy of one onto the other. And like Hassan was saying, I think that's correct as well. Most people are not going to listen to the Mulanas. They're not going to listen to them because the most people who are involved in watching UFC are people who probably are not really interested in a lot of other things in Islam.
There was one Molana on Facebook, right? I'm not going to mention him. But anyway, there's one Molana on Facebook. There's probably a few of these one Molanas. Everybody's got a few. And basically, he said, anybody who watches UFC, is wrong. So I was like, when did TV become halal? You know what I mean? It's like, when did you allow for TV? Because your fiqh is probably like, you can't watch TV. So what are you worried about, UFC or what channel they're watching? But anyway, that's not inside.
I seen one post. I think it may be from the same Molana. Open. What was he saying now? Open mistake. Open haram. You have to publicly and you have to make full tawbah. You're making open haram. And then I'm thinking in my head, if you want to be that strict and that, everything haram, you're looking at it's haram, this haram, that haram, you haram. No, but what I'm trying to say is that women's pictures that you're looking at, you accept women people to come on your Facebook account. Okay, if you want to go that strict, then looking at that picture is haram. If they've got the hair open, it's haram. Okay, if you want to go that clear.
I mean, I think, the thing is, I think people, the problem is on both sides. From the, certain, for example, like approaches of some Molanas, of how they approach things on social media is different from how you approach things on the mimbar in your mosque, right? There's a totally different, topography. How are you going to deal with, the two places? It's quite different. You need to know who you're speaking to, how they're going to listen, how they read things online is very different from how you speak to someone face to face. Yeah. Right? So you might be sitting in a mosque and listen to a Molana on the mimbar. It makes a lot of sense. You can see his emotions. He kind of builds up to what he's going to say. But sometimes what tends to happen is if that same Molana was to give the same talk and write it up on a social media post, he might not be able to express himself in the right way. He might not know like they say, the hikmah, the wisdom of how to present the argument. I think that's one problem. And the other problem I think is that what tends to happen is a lot of the time it becomes an opportunity to sort of like target the Molana community, right? It's like, okay, the Molanas are not experts in everything, right? And not every Molana is an expert in fiqh, right? So a lot of the Molanas will simply just use like a well-known sort of like popular opinion about a certain issue. And then they'll just like, they won't be nuanced in how they approach it.
Sheikh, just mute my mic. My battery's low. I'll come on in a bit then when it
okay. So yeah. So and on the other side, I think so. Like I was saying, what tends to happen is some people will sort of like target the Molana community in this, and then it kind of like makes people think, can't all the Molanas just agree? Aren't the Molanas sophisticated? How comes he's being so so sort of like blunt in how he's approaching this issue? Like, can't he understand that the people involved here are like, people like this? And then, I mean, it's like social media has just created this whole, new type of problem in our society of how Molanas, how do they speak to the people? How do they issue a fatwa? So you've got like, I mean, you know yourself, there are certain fatwas that come from some parts of the world, which already, you can predict what they're going to say about
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like,
But I think the thing is, Mufti Saab, sorry, Mufti Saab, the thing is that at some point, right, like, if you're a Molana or you're a scholar, right, you would have thought there's some level of filter, right? There's some level of filter, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, Mufti Saab, but from all the scholarly friends and people that I've spoken to, and I'm not a scholar, but I've spoken to them, they always talk about being controlled and measured in their approach, and it's something that they're taught by the ustads and their various mashaykh, in terms of like being very measured and controlled in the way that you go about your business, and understanding position that you hold, and full on. Don't say anything from the mimbar. Make sure you're in front of the public. XYZ. Why does that just suddenly go missing on social media for some of them? Like that's that for them classically, they get drilled with that. I know they get drilled with it. They get told, you've got to hold your disposition. You've got to hold your position. You are in a serious position now. You are a leader. You are one of the inheritors of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You have to hold that position. And suddenly, when he gets a Facebook account, it's like, whoa! You just like, Imam Ghazali used to mention that sometimes you have an idea, and then a thought develops into this, and then it goes on. Like, you don't have to put every thought that you have on Facebook. So sometimes you feel like giving these Molanas a bit of a kind of like a lesson on. But like you said, most people don't listen to them. And to be honest, I probably just have put them on.
And as you said, Imam Ghazali, I think Imam Ghazali made a very valid point. He said, everyone needs to understand that they are ignorant in more things that they know. Because you need to know that. If you do not understand, for example, I might be well versed in, let's say, Arabic. But let's say if it comes to some other science, politics, or it comes to things like talking about the internal sort of dealings of how an organization works, I am clueless. I don't even know how it works now. But if I want people to assume that no, I need to have an opinion on it. I need to have an opinion on what's happening in the world. I need to have an opinion on the whole situation with regards to, let's say, entertainment, sports that are happening on the media. I need to have my opinion on there. If you have your opinion, if you've done thorough research and you've looked at all the madhabs, because it's not just a one madhab issue, it's like it's a whole community involved. So if a person has the ability to be able to do all of this and has done full research all the way throughout, and then comes out with their opinion, that person, I'd respect them. I would listen. And like you told me, what's your opinion on this? And I told you, look, I can't find any way of justifying if a person does it purely for money and is doing it to just batter the other person. I can't justify that. But if it's not for that, if it's for strengthening yourself, training yourself, like for example, I was speaking to someone, they were saying there's certain armies, Muslim armies, what they have to do is they have to get hit in the face, right? Part of the training is because if you can't get hit in your face, what are you going to do? Conditioning. So if you're not conditioned by taking the hits in your face, it's like, what are you going to do when you really have to fight the enemy and they're hitting the back of a gun into your face? What are you going to do? And a lot of people, the first thing you learn, you probably learned this as well, the first thing you learn when you do MMA is the first thing they say, get used to taking the punch. If you're scared of taking punches, you are not going to be able to fight the other person. So there are so many nuances when you're talking about MMA or any other sport. Even things like, for example, it was recently this whole thing about playing Ludo. What's the ruling of playing Ludo? Just like, just popped up from somewhere. And it's just like everyone started to give their own opinions about the playing of dice and this and that.
So what happens in lockdown, isn't it?
Exactly. And then it's just like, how on earth are you going to live in a society where people are not really focusing on how they are going to, come out with an answer which is
contextually correct.
Contextually correct. Excellent. Contextually correct. And that's the excellent word.
I think that's a big problem with becoming mufti in today's society as a whole. this tactfulness and this contextualization. Read your audience, read your surroundings, and I think that's why I really, and not just because you're in front of me, Mufti Saab, but that's why I agree with a lot of where you come from, because you understand
Allahu
this.
Akbar.
Oh, subhanallah,
Praise.
nare.
I love Mufti Saab, but he just doesn't answer any questions.
Allah.
And he doesn't
Yeah,
reply
bro.
to WhatsApp messages. It's just haram for Mufti Saab to reply.
You
to
know how
WhatsApp
many
messages.
WhatsApp messages I've got that got green on there? I can
Green?
tell you just without looking. I can tell you there's about 20. There's about
Subhanallah.
20. With
One of them's mine.
See what happens? What happens with me is I get so many messages sometimes. Like I'll be teaching or something for several hours, and then I get, oh, how much is that?
Oh, subhanallah.
Allah
wow.
Akbar. You beat me, bro.
Subhanallah.
I have
Proper
116.
Gujarati.
No.
proper
But
Gujarati
I know what
surname.
those
Now-
are.
now you've,
Most of those are in group messages.
Yes.
Wait there, let me check actually. Let me check.
Yeah, the in group
No,
messages.
those are conversations, Mufti Saab.
Conversations. Whoa. How many people know
Yep.
you?
They're conversations. I'm just checking.
MashaAllah, you made a lot of friends in lockdown.
Yeah, the problem is I don't answer any of them. You know, my status on WhatsApp is, my status is don't WhatsApp me. It's like an email address that gets too much spam. I'm not hunting for your message, nothing personal. That's my status on WhatsApp.
No, that's too long, bro. That's too long. Shorten it. Just say, ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that. And I'm telling you, man. It's like it's like people WhatsApp you and then you don't give them an answer. They're like, brother, I WhatsApped you. I was like, so? Because like,
You
what
know,
do you want me to do about it?
You know what I kind of find annoying is voice messages. When someone sends you like a 3 or 4 minute voice message, yeah.
Yes.
If it's someone I know very well, I don't mind.
Wait, let
But
me
if it's
just
like
check if it was a voice message.
Someone sends a voice message. Now look, if it's a 5 minute voice message, you can't even speed it up. WhatsApp, if you're watching, please, Facebook, if you're watching, Mark Zuckerberg, please speed up the voice note thing times 5 or times 10, right? Because it starts out with Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope you're very well, and then that's taken 10 seconds, bro. Just hit it, bro. Salam, this is the thingy, end of story, yeah? And then sometimes you're in a gathering and you can't play the voice message. You got to wait till you're alone because sometimes it's private.
Mufti Saab, I know where you like reading Tarawih now. 2x speed.
Yeah, I like DMY, bro. At the end, DMY, SLM at the beginning, SLM, I.A, M.A.
This, Mufti Saab, I don't know, right? I don't know about this, Mufti Saab, yeah, but this dua miyad thing, remember me in your duas. If I know you and I'm close to you,
Don't
I will
ask me.
remember you.
Altaf is the man. Yeah, Altaf here. He's the man who is able to answer this. Altaf,
I mean,
the mic's
let
yours.
me say the question
Alhamdulillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. I mean, every single person you meet, brother, please remember me in duas. Yar, I don't remember the guy that I've been chilling for the last 20 years. I don't remember that guy most of the time in my dua. Why am I going to remember you? Like, it doesn't make sense.
You know what? Now I know why you don't have many friends, Hassan. You're just gonna lose some more friends now.
I don't mind. They know what I'm like. It's fine. It's fine. They know I'm doing it's fine.
I think a lot of this, it just becomes like, pilot mode. So
Yeah,
everyone's
yeah.
doing, it becomes the culture where everyone's writing dua miyad at the bottom of the message. Everyone's saying dua miyad. So it's like one of the inshallah ones. Inshallah just rolls off the tongue.
You make
It's
dua
the
for
way
the
he
ummah
said
is
it as
good
well,
enough.
Mufti Saab. Mufti Saab, dua miyad. Mufti Saab, dua miyad. Mufti Saab.
No, actually, I know, I figured it out. Dua miyad is a polite way of saying, I've got to go now. Yeah. So instead of saying, look, some people get a bit offended when you say to them, like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't continue conversation. So you just say, Jazakallah khair, dua miyad. Yeah, and just do one.
Brother, inshallah. The biggest conversation.
And on that
closer-
bombshell, dua miyad on this podcast today.
Actually, we might do one in the future. A dua miyad
or
podcast.
just say aye at the end. That's it, done. Just aye, brother. That's it, done. Aye. I
used to think, IA.
It has to be capital A
IA,
as well.
let me tell you about IA, the history of
No,
IA.
I like the one that corrects your spelling. And you write inshallah. He's like, no, brother.
Brother,
It's spelled
in
I-N space
space.
S-H-A space capital A. And you're like,
No,
oh,
or
dude.
the ones that write the message, but then write the Arabic Assalamu alaikum and write the Arabic Jazakallah khair and the Arabic MashaAllah. And you're thinking, just thank God I know how to read Arabic. Because if you send that, and it has to be with all the vowels. It's like, basically, by the way, you just learned how to read Qaida, yeah? So I put the vowels on there for you as well. Just in case someone pronounces Assalamu alaikum and it's not Assalam.
Brother, don't say create Allah, please. Please,
I think-
you're saying create Allah, brother.
You got to get it right.
Yeah. So I think this is a typical symptom of a society that doesn't really have a clue about where they're going in life. It's like they make things symbolism. Whenever people,
You took it from here, Mufti Saab, and you dropped us off into hell.
let me change the color of the light, bro. Let me change the color of the light.
Turn it
Red,
red.
bro.
Red.
So, and the reason I'm saying this is because what tends to happen in communities, like for example, cutting of the fruit, yeah, and you find the name Allah, or for example, like some people become so obsessive about a particular poem that was written.
Or
Everyone
with
becomes
Photoshop.
obsessive. They all start singing it. They all start memorizing it. And if no one knows that poem, how can you be a true Muslim? Or for
وكف
example,
المصطفى كالورد ينادي Allah. Sorry, you just mentioned poem, didn't it? You're speaking to a person that.
so what I'm saying basically is this happens in communities. People who are like generally, if you find people who are very academic, you won't find them like kind of like busying themselves with like very like symbolism, yeah, like a lot of symbolism. But people who are not really kind of academic, this is what you find. This kind of symbolism, it means a lot to them, right? Starting off the letter like this, message like this, 786, yeah, cutting the fruit, turning over a corner of the musalla.
Isn't that the expression of love for them, though, Mufti Saab? From
might
their
be an expression
intelligence
of
or
love.
intellect.
It could be a result. Okay, it could be love, but that's the only way that they can show love.
But like,
Have you ever seen this? Have you ever seen this, Mufti Saab? The shake your hand. I don't know where this comes from. Shake your hand. Shake your hand.
I do that sometimes, bro. I do that.
Yeah.
I learned that in Pakistan.
No, what is
Shake
that? I
hand,
don't get it.
Shake hand.
He's wiping his hand on his top.
Yeah.
I think
is this
these
an expression of love.
I don't have a problem with these kind of things, but when people make this the focus, and if you're not doing it, that's the problem I have. So if, for example, if they show you, for example, like, cutting the fruit and they show Allah, and you're saying, look, it doesn't really mean anything to me. It's just squiggly lines. But they go, no, it's, look, Allah's name. How dare you? Or for example, like they might have a certain, like the crescent, and you don't show that respect or anything.
Or Mufti Saab, they cut open a tomato and they say Allah's name's in there, and you say, I can't see, and then they poke you in the eye. Can you see it now? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so okay, so let's talk about the last topic then before we finish. So this issue, we don't really have much time, but I think Altaf, you're probably the most qualified person to talk about the problem with poverty. And I think poverty is a big problem in itself, and as Muslims we do really have this kind of like soft spot for helping the poor, because we kind of like our culture, our community is Islamically sort of influenced, and there's always this idea we need to help other people. But when it comes to children, that really hits hard. Everyone, whether you're religious or you're not religious, it's like children poverty, it's not their fault really, and you don't know what situation their parents are in. And then when it comes out with people, this I think this is a beautiful example that a lot of people who kind of use the government card, that don't they get government universal credit, right? Why do they need our extra support? And then you're kind of thinking, are you dumb? Look what the government just said. They don't want to help these people, right? For whatever reason they're saying they don't want to help these people. But at the end of the day, it's like you don't know what the parents, maybe it's a single mother, maybe it's it's parents that are just scraping, maybe it's refugees who are not getting enough funding support and they can't provide for their children. And sometimes when I hear the stories of sometimes like parents having to go to these kind of try to find shops where they can find old food that's going out of date, just to be able to provide for their children, even going to bins to sometimes even try to look for food. In the UK, That's where you think to yourself, things are messed up, man. This just reminds you of like stories in the times of, you know, early days of the Sahaba when they were quite relatively poor. And then you think, subhanallah, how can a mother or a parent, how can they see their children like this? And then you see, remember that there was a, I think there was a few cases, one case where there was an Englishman who actually committed suicide because he just couldn't provide for the children and he didn't know what to say to them. And, subhanallah, I mean, I think these kind of things, it just shows people around the world that in the UK, we have a big problem when it comes to the most basic sort of right that we believe that humans should have, which is at least being able to have something in your stomach. And, you can imagine, I mean, I'll leave this off, but I just want to say, you can imagine when the half-term holidays come, how stressed many parents are going to become because they were getting free school meals and that's one meal done. If you think about it, how much does it cost an average family to be able to provide a meal for their kids? If they got 3 kids and a meal, you're looking at £5-6 minimum, right? For a full meal. So what do they do in their houses? How do they deal with this kind of situation? So tough.
So I think when it comes to the school meals, I think it's we're talking about holiday hunger. So what and precisely what Mufti Saab's talking about is where kids like they will get, no, sometimes they'll get a breakfast club as well in school, or they'll get a and they'll get an afternoon meal on free school meals as well, and then they'll come home and they might not eat that much when they come home, to be honest. And some kids don't even have breakfast. Like when I was working at a couple of the organizations I worked for, we would have lots of like stories and we'd hear lots of people talking about how the kids didn't have breakfast in the morning and they would just go to school, and that's because they couldn't find anything to eat for breakfast in the morning. And some of the kids would bring home fruit for their parents from school, so they would pocket the apple or the banana and they'd bring it home for their parents. When you're talking about stuff like, oh, but everybody gets benefits, look at something like universal. Like I was fortunate enough for like the last probably 10 years, right, to have worked really closely with people in need in the UK, mashallah. And I've been able to look at their finances, I've looked at their balance, I've looked at their bank statements, I've done in-depth. There are people amongst them who just need to be able to finance and budget better, right? And that does exist. And that's a small proportion of people. There's a massive proportion of people that are out there, right, that are just struggling. So they will pay their bill, they will get benefit. They can't work for a number of reasons. At this moment in time, we're probably at like, they're calling 2020 the unprecedented year, right? We're going to look at a number of redundancies taking place as well in the next couple of months. The furlough scheme's over, it's going to grow. When you look at people on benefits, once they've paid all their bills if you're on universal credit, you might be lucky if you're left with £40 for the rest of the month.
£40 for the rest of the month.
Yeah, once you've paid your bills and like you've paid your bills, you've got the necessities in the house, and I'm not talking about food as well, right? I'm not talking about like excessive food.
Can you give us like a rough figure of how much they earn?
It depends on kind of like what type of benefit they receive and stuff like that. But if you were to say break it down, Mufti Saab, is that after they paid their bills, they'd be at roughly about 40, 50, maybe 60 quid, right, for the month. And they've got to make that stretch. Now, I was, and that's people in different situations. So if you're like an asylum seeker, and you've just got your status, like, that's difficult for you. If you're going through the asylum process, it's even more difficult for you, right? Because you'll get like 25 to 30 quid a week. And like if you need some clothes, that's thrown your budget completely out the window. If you need X, Y, Z, £35, sorry. So if you get something else, then it throws your budget completely out the window. Now, holiday food or holiday hunger, as they call it, is where kids basically in the holidays would struggle to find food in the house. So they have like jam sandwiches every single day, right? That's what they would eat because that's all they can have. And the question is that actually, the question for the government was, the way that we spend money, is there a way of reallocating or reproportioning some of that money so that we can use it in a way that children get fed and the holiday hunger doesn't exist? It's not about giving more, it's just about reappropriating some of the money that they currently have and they spend taxes on in elsewhere. So that was the question that was raised. And now if you look at like poverty within the UK itself, right, it exists at a massive level. Food banks are increasing.
Sorry, like what kind of numbers are we looking at? Like, do you know from the top of your head, what kind of numbers at the moment of children are we looking at that are really struggling?
In terms of children that are struggling at the moment that would qualify, I think I'll find the figure out, Mufti Sahib. I'll have a quick look at that number.
Yeah, that'd be
But I think
interesting to look at, because I mean, I think it'll give us a better understanding. I mean, in reality, when we were growing up in the 80s and the 90s, we didn't really have much. I mean, my parents, I used to have school dinners, so my parents were not really earning that much. But it was like, I don't know. I mean, there was a sense that, okay, your parents are not earning that much, but at the same time, when you look at it today, it doesn't really make sense. Like for me, it doesn't make sense. It made sense then, but I can't really put my finger on it. Like, why is it wrong today? I didn't see it as wrong when I was growing up.
the
Yeah.
funny thing is, Mufti Sahib, is that you probably didn't realize that you were going through some form of poverty.
Mm,
And that's the difference. Like I used to get that a lot of times. So we used to talk about poverty within the Muslim community, and people used to say to us, "Oh, but when I was a kid, I was brought on up on X, Y, and Z." And it's like, well, that didn't make it right.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? Just because you cope in that moment, right, in whatever way
yeah.
you coped in that moment, doesn't make it a right. If you're
Mm,
take it this way, Mufti Sahib, if you're zakat eligible, you're zakat eligible. I like
mm,
using zakat eligibility because it's black and white, right? Because it gives you a predominant figure. It says if you have less than X
yeah.
amount of money, you are eligible. If you don't have X amount, if you have more than X amount, you're not eligible, right? If you
Mm,
were if you were to look at many people's finances when they were younger, right, and to how much liquid assets that they had and how much debts and liabilities and all that kind of stuff. If you looked at the zakat eligibility of our own families as we grew up, we probably would say that they were probably eligible for zakat.
mm.
A lot of people will probably say that. In terms of the numbers, we've sub 4 million children qualify for free school meals within the
1.4,
UK.
1.4
And the
million.
qualification criteria for
How
that
many are
is,
there altogether? How many numbers of children are there in the UK?
I'm not sure. Um, I think I can remember it 30, just under 30%, something like that,
Yo,
for school
that's
meals.
a
But I'm
big
not
number.
100%
That
sure, Mufti
is
Sahib.
1.4 million. That's a massive number.
20% of the student population, between 17 and 20% of the whole student population is eligible for school meals. So when you look at that, when you look at the eligibility for school meals, that's one thing. The second thing is that criteria is for, are eligible for school meals as long as their household income does not exceed £7,500 after tax.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it is looking at that. So when we're talking about those 1.4 million, we're talking about those people that are like really, 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 really struggling at this moment in time. When you look at food banks and the increase in food banks, like the Trussell's Trust have kind of like done over 1 million portions of food. We know from our own experience of working with people that are going through poverty that the numbers are increasing, and the numbers are going to increase even more because the hospitality sector has been hit really badly by COVID-19. So those people that were on the lower income jobs are going to be struggling, even more. Right,
So,
they're not going to have jobs.
so hospitality is including restaurants and it's including hotels and leisure.
Yeah, house, leisure, holidays, places, all those kind of things that like create industry. They're going to struggle. Obviously, like somebody might say, "Oh, but my takeaway is killing it." That's not reflective of the whole of the UK. Your takeaway is just your takeaway. So I think that's the first thing. In terms of the numbers, we're talking like 1.4 million children. If you're talking about from the Muslim community, I think that there was like a startling figure of like 132,000 roughly were living in poverty. I can remember that figure being bandied about. And so when you look at how many Muslims are actually going through some form of poverty or some form of difficulty, there is a significant number of people that are going through difficulty and a difficult moment. And I think the question that we're saying at this moment in time is that actually, as it gets more difficult within the UK, particularly this year, do we have a responsibility to firstly make sure that we're campaigning that the government changes its rules, and secondly, is there many things that we can do to us help and assist? SubhanAllah, it's been amazing. Not just Muslim businesses, but businesses across the UK have stood up to the challenge over half term, and they'll be giving out free meals for children. And SubhanAllah, to protect the dignity of children, what they've done is that they've not said it's just free dinners or free meals for just children who receive school meals. They've just said it's for everybody. So businesses have just been doing free food for kids in the holidays. And I
Okay.
think that's pretty
Subhanallah.
amazing because it respects the dignity of the child. first and foremost, so they don't feel like they're any different, right? And
I
secondly,
think maybe one. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I think because of the sort of like very harsh response that the government gave, or the way that they kind of worded it, with regards to not providing for them in the holidays. I think maybe that might have triggered something in a lot of people emotionally. That felt, you know what, we want to sort of like stand up against this, and we want to support. So I think maybe there's some sort of like a wisdom in how that sort of panned out.
it's come from that football player Marcus Rashford in it, who's been kind of like leading the campaign and like really been taking charge of this. And I think that's been really, really kind of important.
Someone's saying here, Umbreen saying children from BME backgrounds, 46% are in poverty, subhanallah, as compared to 26% in the British white families.
And poverty is like that. The figure for poverty can be different, so it can be like less than the average income. So some definitions go with less than the average income. Some people go with the percentage less than the average income as well. So there's kind of like different definitions for what poverty actually means. There was an interesting discussion we once had, Mufti Saab. We shared.
Okay.
We were discussing this. This was just a discussion point. Is that should nisab reflect? And this was like this was never went anywhere. It's just a discussion that we had with a few scholars.
One of those controversial discussions.
One of the controversial discussions, but we had one with scholars, and we were just asking them the question. We said, should nisab be reflective of a poverty index of that country in that particular moment?
I remember that one.
So should it be relative to that number? And it was a really interesting discussion about how they could see the point, but then the sanctity of nisab was also important, and so on and so forth. But it was a really good discussion because what we were trying to just point out is like the definition of poverty, and what that looks like, and is that actually poverty? And those are really good comments to get into. But when we looked at those who are suffering the most, there is this massive need. It's like when you can see, and when I've been to refugees' houses, I've been to asylum seekers' houses, refugees and newly settled asylum seekers' houses as well, or those who've just been given status. I've been to some centers as well. I've been to families who's struggling. Mufti Saab, it's heartbreaking when you go to the houses.
I know you mentioned this to me before. I do apologize. Okay.
Go on, Mufti Saab.
You mentioned this to me, but just for the benefit of the listeners, when you say you've been to like certain places, you're talking about places like single mothers, domestic violence victims, residents, and you're including all that, aren't you?
Including all that, I could tell you some of the stories that are like frightening. Just to drop money off in like in a DV shelter once. And I met like this young lady, but I'll tell that story afterwards. In terms of like, just generally, when you go to the houses, right, you understand what poverty looks like. When they have like one pot or two pots in the kitchen, and that's all they have. They don't have anything in the fridge. They just have like a carton of milk in the fridge, if that. And then you look around the home, and I once went and I looked around the homes, and I was just trying to make an assessment of like what they had and what they didn't have. So I said, am I okay to have a look around? And the brother said to me, he goes, I want you to know exactly what we have, right? So I want to show you. I was like, cool, let's have a look around. And his kids didn't have blankets, right? Considering they just come from a hot country. This was somebody who just newly arrived. Kids didn't have any blankets, no carpets inside the house. The heating they weren't putting on because they were on quarterly meters. So they were scared to call up the gas or electric company to get the meters changed. They were on key machine, the key ones. The meters when you put a card in for gas and Lecky cards. So they had that, and that the standing charge on that was killing them, right? So they could hardly put the heating on as well inside the house. And then they had to make decisions between heating and food. And all of these kind of things were taking place. So I went to their house and I saw what that looks like, and I was like, okay, let's try to help and support you guys. I've been to people's houses who've just been broken up. I was telling you a story. I met a sister that I was just delivering some support to, and was with her. She was with her key worker, and we just had a discussion. And she was like, "Yeah, I just come over from Pakistan. 8 weeks. She came over 8 weeks ago. She goes, in the first day, she arrived in their house after she got married to her husband. She got beaten up by the family. She thought, she accepted it. She just thought, this is just life, that I'm just gonna have to get used to it. She then got up the courage to leave the house after about 2 to 3 weeks. She got taken to a hostel. The family found her in the shelter, right? Promised her everything would be okay, and they brought her back. Second time, she got beaten within an inch of her life. She got taken back into the shelter. So I just went and had a conversation with a young 22, 23-year-old girl, and I was like, so what happens now? I said, like, we're giving you help and support here with food and a little bit of whatever. But how can we help you? Can we get you to go back to Pakistan? Is that going to help you? She goes, if I go back to Pakistan, they're going to kill me and my family. They'll come for me in Pakistan by my village. She goes, I can't go back there. And she goes, I can't put my family in danger as well. If they know I'm away from my family, they won't like go after my family. So I was like, okay, so what are you going to do now? And she goes, I just don't know. The 22-year-old young lady, Musab, in another country, right, has no family or no support mechanism, and she's just going through the support and care system for domestic violence. And so you look at stuff like that, and it really does have an impact on you. And then you look at, the stories of just general poverty that you come across, where children are going without, whether they've got ripped shirts or they're not able to afford school uniform. Affording school uniform, or the barriers to getting school uniform, is massive. Such a pressure for parents, especially when they have to get 2 or 3 school uniforms. It's like, it was so difficult. And remember, there were like local centers that were supporting parents with school uniform, and helping them with that, helping them with getting books, school trips, all of these kind of things. It all kind of like stacks up and adds up. But what happens is that because we've gone through a level of poverty living in an inner city area and being brought up in that, we kind of like almost sometimes when we see some of this poverty, like for the wider community, for the non-Muslim community and for the wider community, they will just see this as poverty. But we will see it as character building in a weird way. We will say, oh, this is going to build their character when they're older. They'll appreciate things. And like, subhanAllah, you're telling that to young kids? Like that, that can't eat, that, the kids can't go to the fridge and just pick out food because there's nothing in the fridge to eat. The parents are stressed, and you talked about a couple of cases, Muftasab, where the parents have, taken their own lives or put their children into care because they just couldn't look after them. And you just think how gut-wrenching and difficult that is.
I mean, when you think about these kind of things, you just think, in reality, we've got so many problems in our own community. I think that's one of the biggest sort of like shock that people first hear when they hear about these cases. And the second is, the mental long-term sort of impact it's going to have on these families, on these people. I mean, where they're going to end up, what's going to happen when they grow up? Are they going to join like some sort of like a gang or something? Because that's the thing that comes to your mind. You're growing up poverty.
I think the thing was, Muftasab, this is the crazy thing, right? When we talk about poverty and we talk about homelessness, if you said to everybody, close your eyes and think about a homeless person, the homeless person would normally be a male and he'd normally be white. Right? When you look in just Birmingham and you go to this youth homelessness charity, and they say to you that 30% or 36% of the kids that come to us are from a Black, Asian or minority ethnic background. Predominantly, they were saying to me at one stage that from that 30-odd percent, 90% of that 30% are Muslim.
SubhanAllah.
And you're like, what? These are between the ages of 16 and 21 being kicked out of their houses. Kicked out of their houses, or they've been left out of their houses, or they can't go home, or they don't have a home.
Yeah, Ajib. So okay, so what's the like? What do you kind of forecast for the coming years?
I think it's going to get a lot.
Is it getting worse?
I think it's going to get a lot worse. I think with the current situation with COVID and the impact that it's having on the economy, the numbers are going to drive up. I was looking at what the National Zakah Foundation were doing, and they've seen like a massive increase in the number of cases they're getting. A massive, huge increase in the number of cases that they work with or dealing with. I've seen other organizations as well across the country, and these are good indicators for us, because these are organizations that provide frontline support, When you talk to other organizations as well, you can see the uplift that they're seeing in the amount of services that they're delivering in terms of food banks, the numbers going up. And it's just going to go up because we're in that difficult moment where, you know, a lot of people are going to be struggling and
I don't
stressing
know.
to pay the
Sorry, I
bills.
don't know what situation like in Sheffield. What is it? Do you think it's very similar? I don't know if you have seen the.
I couldn't just see a lot of the stuff because I didn't want to really speak on this issue because if I don't have much knowledge in it, it's better to be quiet. So it's
What about food
but
banks? Do you have food banks
yeah,
opening up
we do
there?
have food banks, but we do have food banks, Muslim organizations. I don't know about the non-Muslim organizations. See, my knowledge on this is quite low, but
Yeah.
I can understand. See, one of the things I have, you know, these are the kind of people that Altaf Bhai, I didn't know what he did before, but these are the kind of people that are heroes. And the reason why I'm saying they are heroes, and the people that are going through these situations are heroes. And the reason why is because you never get to see that. When you're in a kind of situation where you're blessed and you've got certain issues going on, no, I don't think anyone doesn't have an issue going on, and you have certain issues going. But then when you hear of situations like the young lady he was talking about where she got battered in Pakistan and she came here, that problem is never gonna go away. Like, so I don't know what to say. That's why I didn't say anything. But the situation, I guess, yes, I think Asufa did have a branch in Sheffield. I don't know. I don't know about now, but I don't have much knowledge of that, so I can't really comment on that. I apologize.
Because I mean I don't know how true this is, but I've heard from stats that up the more north you go, the more up north you go in the UK, the more there's a problem with poverty. Because like there's certain areas that the entire road, streets and streets, like they're just like barren, empty. You know, people can't afford to buy the houses, and you know it's kind of like it's a correlation between house prices and between these kind of things as well.
But you see that in certain areas and in certain council estates, and obviously, I don't know how the Rome Slovakia. Obviously, they're in poverty as well. I mean, I understand everything, but that's one issue just down the road. It's called one of the worst areas in Sheffield in the whole of UK. Just down the road, and you know that these people have nothing. You know that they have groups of people. If you go down the road now, just 5 minutes away, groups of people all together. And the way they say it is half of them go to sleep in the morning and half of them go to sleep in the evening. And there's like 12 of them, 15 of them living in the same house. And they get the children just to have, more children just to get benefits. Do you know what I'm for? It's crazy. Yeah. So you see 16-year-olds leave school. Next minute, you see the same 16-year-old walking on the street thinking, I know what's happened there. And then
but I think maybe we don't know the whole situation of why that is. Maybe it's because of they don't really have any other option. It might be that kind of situation where, okay, so Altaf, just to finish off on this, just so that we don't go too long.
Sorry, I couldn't really comment on that.
The food bank issue,
Yeah.
Is that like a long-term sustainable solution that you think that we should invest in, or is there anything else that you think that would actually be more productive?
So there's two things there. Food banks are like the one of the last safety nets, and that's what they're there for, is to be that last safety net. I think kind of like there's two things that we really need to do. One is, and I know this is going to sound dry, but it does make a difference. One is making sure that we're always taking part in petitions, in community activity or community action when it comes to raising the issue around poverty. I think that's really, really important.
Or do you mean like contact your MP and all that?
I don't think it's contact your MP. I think kind of like taking part in initiatives, activities. There will be people in your areas and your local localities. Kind of like saying localities, you're just thinking about 6 points again. There will be people within your area or the places that you live that will be kind of like targeting and interested in raising this conversation, and it's about helping and supporting them. So anything you can do to support your local organizations that are helping in this area. If you see petitions online, then signing them about kind of like, taking a discussion. There is a lot of power in numbers. Like Marcus Rashford, he started a petition that has like 1.3, 1.4 million people now that signed it about ending child poverty. And you can see the momentum that movements create. We live in a time where, or in an environment where our policy is affected by the numbers of people. Politics is about currency. Currency is about votes. Votes is about following the people. So whenever you get a good groundswell of people, generally, bar the Iraq war, generally where you get a good groundswell of people and you get good momentum behind something, people will generally start changing stuff. So look at child poverty. Child poverty was always on the register, but it didn't have any momentum. Marcus Rashford comes, he signs our petition. Suddenly now you've got serious, massive church faith leaders and all the other organizations that when they're talking about child poverty, it's getting listened to, it's getting picked up by the media. It creates pressure. And so we live in a different kind of a policy environment. Sorry, I'm just a policy graduate, man. But I kind of like that's how you make.
It's
change.
interesting. I find it quite interesting, to be fair.
So you're saying, okay,
and that's one way,
get
Mufti Saab,
involved,
and
yeah?
the second way is to get involved and donate, because whilst we don't have that change at policy level or within government, there are going to be people who are falling through the net, and it's our job, our
Like
responsibility as
donate, is
part of our
it
religion.
cash donations, or is it just
Cash
like food parcels
donations.
or clothes?
Cash donations, parcels, for whatever you can do, you can find a local organization that will collect it. When it comes to cash, people always ask me, should I give a beggar cash? If I see somebody, I walk past somebody. My preference is always to buy them something. Is always to get them food or give them something like that. And the least that you can do is give them a hi and give them a smile. We did an experiment about 6 years ago now, Mufti Saab, 6-7 years ago, where we had a few of our colleagues from the homeless project sleep outside on the roads. And they went through the whole experience of rough sleeping for 3 nights in a row, 2 to 3 nights. And they said to me that there's actually a brother from Sheffield, brother Nasir.
Nasir.
Yes.
Nasir, who was sleeping in Sheffield on the streets, and he said that he was sleeping on the streets, and somebody from his road walked past him and didn't give him a glance, and he knew that person really, really well. And other brothers like Latif and a few others that were talking about kind of like sleeping on the roads, they were saying that the most difficult part of it was being completely ignored by everybody. So if you're not going to give them food, if you don't want to give them cash, give them a smile and say hello.
Wow.
Abdul Hamid as well. I remember he used to say things like,
yeah.
It's just so embarrassing trying to ask people for money. It's just, I think that point the last point that you mentioned, I think we'll finish on that. What you mentioned about the when it comes to it's like poverty, it's always been there. But the thing is it's like, Marcus Rashford, he's just kind of highlighted it now. So what I'm trying to kind of figure out in my head is it because we're reacting to this, right? And then it's just going to slowly fizzle away. And then we'll just be back to normal again. And then we're waiting for the next celebrity or the next, media sort of coverage. And then again, we'll be sensationalized.
So everything's about making small and incremental changes. So every moment creates a small change. Or you're hoping it creates a small change. It's not, no one moment's going to be that moment that changes everything. It seldomly happens where that one moment changes everything. But you're hoping that from these moments, you create those changes that, over a period of time, make a big difference, inshallah. But I think unemployment's going to go up in the next 9 months. They're predicting it's going to be at the 1980s levels. People are being made, are losing their positions, their jobs, left, right, and center at the moment. So this is only going to go one way.
Allah make it easy for all of us.
Ameen.
Alhamdulillah.
Okay,
so Jazakallah khair. Just one last thing, if Hassan can sing something for us. Just a small little 1 minute, 2 minute thing, and then we're gonna finish off.
Okay.
So guys, get ready.
I mean, it's very strange. My mom's asking me, am I inside the house? I think she can't hear me from my room. Okay, fair dues. She's downstairs. She's asking me, are you out? No, I'm upstairs. Can you hear me? I love my mom. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Also, they asked for Dil Dil Pakistan, yeah? So I'll do a little thing of that. Why not? Sorry, it's not. Chak De. Oh, Chak De India. Sorry,
That was for you, Altaf.
If he needs to do it for me, he needs to say God save the Queen, mate.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Can we have God save the Queen instead of Dil Dil Pakistan?
Dil
know
Dil
what?
England.
Let me just make it sorry. Oh, okay, something in Arabic. Let's just keep it at that. All right.
You're not going to do God save the Queen, or you're going to do it in Arabic? That'd be amazing. God save the Queen in Arabic, Mufti Saab.
Okay, but they did ask for Dil Dil Pakistan. Do you mind, Altaf? Is that all right?
Go for it, bro. Your stage is yours.
I'm from
2
Aston.
minutes.
It's the same thing, bruv.
It's just one verse. So I did it. ऐसी ज़मीं और आसमान इनके सिवा जाना कहाँ भरती रहे ये रोशनी चलता रहे ये कारवां दिल दिल पाकिस्तान जान जान पाकिस्तान दिल दिल पाकिस्तान जान जान पाकिस्तान दिल
Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar.
Allah
May
nare.
Allah save you from Nazar.
Ameen. Jazakallah, Mufti. Mufti, your dua as always. I really appreciate the fact that you allowed me on your.
No, it's
podcast.
good. I enjoyed
Really-
it. I enjoyed having. Maybe in the future we'll bring you back as well.
Oh no, it'd be my pleasure.
Talk about
Altaf bhai,
mathematics.
Jazakallah.
Talk
Very
about
nice to meet
mathematics.
you and
Mathematics
talk
is
to
your field, isn't it?
Sorry?
What's your field of expertise? Mathematics. Are you-
Mathematics, yeah. Mathematics.
Masters in mathematics you got.
BSc in mathematics, yeah.
Oh, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
Have you worked out any more prime numbers? There's supposed to be like a big challenge, isn't there, to get the next prime number?
Is it? Nah.
Yeah, there's like it's like
Do-
£1 million
doesn't- it
prize or
doesn't-
something.
Ooh. What was it? I'll give you a film.
Mufti Saab, can I just say one thing to Maji? Maji, who's on our comments at the moment. Maji, I will tell the story from the 27th night of what happened in As-Sufa. Right? So if you do not go away now, I will tell that story of how you embarrassed yourself for the rest of eternity. Right, on the 27th night when Sheikh was praying Quran as well, mashallah.
Allah, I want to know about this one next time. Inshallah. Okay, I think we'll finish there. I apologize, Hassan. We're gonna have to finish on that one. My earphones are about to finish back. The battery's about to die.
Oh, no worries. But Jazakallah for having me. Jazakallah. Nice talking to you, Altaf bhai. If I said anything wrong, please forgive me everything, yeah? Take care of yourself.
All right, guys, take care, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.